my name is Elise Amel, and I am a faculty member at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota. And I have a couple different roles at St. Thomas. In addition to being a faculty member, I'm also the director of the Office of Sustainability Initiatives there. So that's the role I'm going to be talking mostly about today. And then after I'm done with some general introductions and a case study from St. Thomas, I will hand it off to Kelsey, who's my colleague from Marquette University. So thanks for joining us today. It's really exciting to be here. I'm really grateful for Ashoka having gone through the effort to change this from in-person to online was not an easy task, and it's really great to still be able to follow through with this. So I just wanted to start by saying how essential it is that we as individuals do our part towards sustainability, such as biking when we can, walking when we can, recycling, all that kind of thing. However, only focusing on our private sphere behaviors will not really create the tsunami of change that absolutely needs to happen in order to have social, environmental, and economic sustainability. So we really need to focus our individual work on changing the systems around us that are driving much of our human impact. And really workplaces in this organizational sphere are a really great place to magnify an individual's impact. So universities really are, have been social systems that have changed the way humans do things for a very long time. We've really unfortunately contributed to the current unsustainable culture that we have globally, but we do have this potential to take what we do and make it a driver of the sustainability and regenerative work that needs to happen. More specifically, universities have some challenges that make this sort of work difficult. Faculty work autonomously. Administrative units are divided into silos, as are disciplinary units. And sometimes change doesn't happen rapidly because of the long tenure that many people have at universities. But those challenges are really outweighed by the idea that people attend university in order to learn, and so they're learning organizations and really great sources for innovation. So I do think that in the end, universities are really poised to lead with especially regenerative work. So Kelsey and I have put together a little grid here that you might consider sort of taking notes along these lines. As we go through, we'll talk about some of the sort of the empirically based classic ideas underlying organizational change, and you can indicate to yourself whether you already have these things in place in your organization, or if they really are areas where you need to improve, and you can jot down ideas about that occur to you, where you might be able to leverage your resources at your university to create these opportunities. And so I'll go through each one of these areas of organizational change. Most of them are pretty self-explanatory. Most organizations have a mission statement, and some institutions are more mission-driven than others. But if you've got a mission-driven organization, aligning the vision of your programming to that vision is a really great way to make sure people can get on board with it. I'm going to show you a model of transformational leadership. I don't know how familiar you are with leadership paradigms, but transformational leaders are really effective in times of change and upheaval, and there are sort of four basic things that make them transformational. One is their assumptions about all of the people working with them being capable of doing their work well, and so empowering people to do their work rather than trying to micromanage is really a critical feature. Transformational leaders typically have a lot of power for a variety of reasons, including that they're considered experts, they've demonstrated their expertise, and people like them. And this combination of power is really a great lever for getting people to join you in making change. A third feature is that transformational leaders communicate their vision of the future, and they really are cheerleaders for what a positive vision of the future might be. And then fourthly, it's also part of making sure people are empowered to join the change. Transformational leaders do things like encourage people and provide positive feedback to them to help them know that they're on the right track. So this is sort of the most elaborate of the aspects of change that we'll be talking about, and I'll refer back to those aspects of leadership shortly. Another feature that's really important for making organizational change is planning and really being mindful about how you go about creating a plan, making sure that you engage a lot of people in the conversation, and then followed by having really targeted working groups who come up with a game plan based on knowledge and expertise, and then making sure that there is a regular interface with the administration so that, and this has a couple really important features to this. It's important for administrators to be able to comment on the progress of a plan, but also it's important for them to feel like they know what's going on so that they're not caught off guard when people ask questions. Once you do some planning, creating a roadmap is really important where people understand what goals need to be achieved and who's going to achieve them, or be responsible for making sure they're achieved is really important. And then finally, maintaining communication at all phases of organizational change. This has some really important components to it. First of all, it helps people be knowledgeable about where we are at any given point in time, and it also is a vehicle for making people have a sense of positive momentum. So just to sort of riff off of these very basic organizational change principles, we're going to talk to you about what St. Thomas has done and what Marquette University has done. So back to that first aspect of mission alignment. St. Thomas happens to be a very mission-driven institution. If anybody was at the keynote introduction where our president expressed our mission and how everything we do is, touches back to that mission, that gives you a sense of just how it's part of our conversation every day. And so in order to create sort of a culture of sustainability at our institution, we made sure that our language was reflecting this mission. And you can see I've underlined leadership, and the common good in our mission gets translated very specifically to sustainability in our vision, just so people recognize that what we're talking about is part of the common good. And we actually at our institution define sustainability based on the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which is a very broad definition that includes, people, profits, and planet. So the second feature of effective organizational change is having a transformational leadership. And in the case of our president, Julie Sullivan, she's our president, so that makes her a legitimate leader, but she's also a PhD accountant. So she knows what she's talking about in terms of understanding the viability of different programming and having a future vision of the future. And she's also incredibly well liked by faculty, staff, and students alike. She is kind, she's humble, and she's really a cheerleader for everything that people do at our institution. So she's like in a perfect position to lead change at our institution. So having said that, anybody can be a transformational leader. You don't have to be the president of the institution. And part of the challenge of organizational change is finding people everywhere in the institution who can demonstrate the different behaviors that transformational leaders display. And transformational leadership is learnable, it's practicable, and so encouraging transformational leaders encourage other leaders is what it ends up happening, and it sort of disperses the leadership throughout an institution. Communicating throughout the process is really important. Communicating the need for change is what you need to do up front, but then continuing that communication to make sure that people remember why we're doing it, and also how much progress we've made and where we're headed allows empowering of other people. And I just have an example here of a newspaper article for our institution at the launch of our strategic planning initiative. There was a quote from the president, a very long quote that I just circled a couple pieces of it. She said, "Sustainability is core to our mission." Now, this is a signal to everybody at our institution that you can do this. This is a valid thing for you to be spending your time on. You won't get punished for doing this. This is where we're headed. The second circle is very key. This quote, we use it all the time. She said, "This is not the job of one person, but of all of us." So she really does disperse the role across the institution. It's not just her job. It's not just the job of the sustainability coordinator. It's everybody's work. The next piece is understanding our baseline situation. And in order to do this, we used a prepackaged inventory called the ASHE stars. Many of your institutions will have done this as well. We got a silver rating our first time through, which was, not where we want to be, but it really helped us understand where our strengths are and where our opportunities were. And our opportunities that were identified ended up being part of the discussion of our strategic planning process. So when we decided to start planning, it ended up taking a year to go through the strategic planning process. And we started out by getting broad participation. And then after we got the results of that participation, we added it to our baseline information and had working groups with integrated a variety of different operational units that helped us refine specific goals and priorities that would go into the strategic plan. And then we had an iterative approach with our administration so that they were constantly abreast of where we were headed, and they would give us our okay, their imprimatur before we would move too far ahead of ourselves. And then it was really easy for them to give it the double thumbs up when we were done. So just to give you an idea of some of the different pieces of the strategic process, like I said, we started out with very broad participation. We had an electronic ideas wall where people could share what they wanted the university to look like. And they could talk about the way we purchase things, or how people get to the university, or how the facilities operate. And it was a really fun interface that was very much like social media. So our students especially loved the how interactive it was. Somebody could post an idea with a picture and other people could like it and they could comment. And we ended up getting 1,200 unique users, which is, you know, just about maybe 10% of the institution. And they spent, you know, 15 minutes of their time adding ideas and that kind of thing. And so this was you know, something that you could actually do now, even though, you know, all the campuses are closed, you can still, you know, gather information electronically. In addition to the ideas wall, then we had 9 working groups and a handful of courses that contributed. And then we actually brought all the participants from the working groups together in a vision workshop where over 60 people from different areas of the institution all came together to share what they were finding in their research and ideas for where the strategic plan should go. And it was a really great momentum building and excitement building workshop, but it also helped people see where they had opportunities to work together to make an even bigger impact. So we ended up having 9 working groups, and they covered some of the very basic areas that you would find in the ASHE STARS report. And this is how we not only organized the strategic planning, but we also organized our published plan using, you know, these major categories. So after about a year of work, we put together a strategic plan, and it was really sort of high-level summary of some of the very specific goals that we had come up with together. It was really important to publish this roadmap and make it accessible. It's accessible both electronically. Anybody can access it through our website, but we also had a few very targeted printed copies that we would share with various stakeholders around the institution. And it was really important to articulate the structural ways we were going to change. We had a lot of really great grassroots work that had been done, but very little in terms of policy that would get everybody sort of moving in the same direction. So we ended up including a lot of policy work in our strategic plan. Also, while it's not in the published version, there's a sort of behind the scenes version where each goal set for every year is linked with a person whose job it is to ensure that that work was getting done. And in this way would institutionalize the work rather than being a volunteer activity like I'll get to it when I can. This is really part of a person's job. So then it becomes part of the, you know, the human resource system, the system of hiring people, the system of training people, the system of evaluating their performance. And it sort of becomes part of the work of every position in the university that way. And then to wrap up in terms of communication, we found it really important to, like I mentioned before, keep the administration abreast of how things were going throughout the process so that when it came time to sort of approve of the plan, it was a no-brainer for the administrators. And then they knew enough along the way where they could be communicating to their reports the importance of engaging in the process. On the back external side of the printed copy, in the last page of the electronic copy of our strategic plan, we include the quote from President Sullivan that it's not just the job of one person, but everybody needs to be working on this. An invitation for everybody to pay attention and to identify where this can be part of their own work. So at this point in time, I would stop sharing my slides and invite Kelsey to share hers.
Awesome. Thanks, Elise. So I'm gonna share my screen in just a sec and introduce myself. And I will say, as kind of a transition to all of this, I first got connected with St. Thomas back when I did a site visit there when they were first becoming an Ashoka U Changemaker campus. And this was a couple years ago, and it has just been amazing to see as a university how they have blossomed and grown and continued to embrace all of these change-making ideals. And I've stayed in close touch with a lot of them, and we continue to learn things from each other. And so it's been a real privilege and honor getting to spend this time with Elise and be able to just share notes on how we both leveraged a really similar process when going about major organizational and institutional change. And so I hope you all are able to take away some things from this presentation. So hopefully you can all see my screen now. I, as Elise mentioned, am at Marquette University, so I have one of my Marquette sweatshirts on to represent today virtually. And one of the things I am most proud of is the work that we've done with what we refer to as the 707 Hub. And as a little bit of background for you all, Marquette, like so many universities, had a very traditional sense of what innovation meant, and we were incredibly siloed on campus. And so innovation was part of the College of Business, but it wasn't really accessible to students from other colleges and departments or majors on campus, and social innovation wasn't necessarily part of the conversation either. And so rather than continue to pit those against each other, we decided to engage in a very similar process of organizational institutional change and rethink and revision what innovation meant across boundaries on our campus. The end result of that did include the physical manifestation of a space, and I will highlight some of that, but it really included a lot more than just the physical space, and a lot of that is because we had some amazing stakeholders that were part of the process. So this is just on the screen you can see this is a quick look at what the space actually looks like in today's form. It's a rough space with a lot of character and a lot of different innovation happening, and that's what we like. So as Elise mentioned in kind of our outline and worksheet that we shared at the beginning, one of the things that we both noted was incredibly important in this process was to make sure that we had a strong mission and vision alignment. And lucky for us, we already had innovation baked into that, and it was innovation really broadly speaking. Back in 2014, we got a new president at Marquette University, and he was our first lay president. It's probably a good time to mention that Marquette University is a private Catholic Jesuit university located in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, so not too far from St. Thomas up in St. Paul, Minnesota. And we had very traditional ways of operating, and so our new president came in and really wanted to change some of the notion of what we thought about innovation and who could be innovative. And so our board worked on changing and updating and approving our revised mission and vision statements. And one of them, the vision, is what I specifically wanted to share with you all today, and that was that we were aiming to be amongst the most innovative and accomplished Catholic and Jesuit universities in the world. And so innovation was baked into our priorities across the campus from the get-go, and that allowed us to really engage a broad number of stakeholders that we hadn't been able to in the past. One of the other great things was we did have our brand new president, Mike Lovell, and he institutionalized a number of different elements around innovation that became critical to our process. One of those was launching the first office of research and innovation. So we actually united and combined our research offices and research disciplines as well as our innovation across campus and appointed a vice president to oversee both of those. And our vice president, Jean Hasselhoff, appointed and empowered myself and my colleague, Megan Carver, to work collaboratively on all of the day-to-day work. So my colleague, Megan, had been in the College of Business, and I served the rest of the campus. Megan does our traditional typical work around entrepreneurship, and I was focused on social innovation. We thought it does not make sense in terms of university resources to continue to have these operate separately, to have them operate siloed, and mismanage our resources by running programs that were similar but housed in different areas and with different structures. And so we came together and were empowered by senior leadership at the university to start to rethink all of these different ways that we went about deploying innovation and specifically social innovation across campus. One of the really cool things that was happening at the same time is we had students that were starting to say, hey, we need to rethink what innovation looks like on our campus as well. And so that kind of presented for us a really prime challenge and opportunity, an opportunity for us to rethink about what innovation looked like, who got to be innovative, and who got to be part of this process. So there's two students here in this picture. When we went to start, measuring and mapping out our baseline of where we were, the two of them had submitted a proposal to our president and said, we want to create a new innovation space on campus that is open to all students from every college and major, and that has free resources for them to be able to solve problems of any magnitude and scale. And our president said, I love it. Work with Kelsey and Megan, and that really started to change the notion when it comes to transformational leadership for us of who got to be in charge and who got to be involved in this particular project. So often it's senior leaders that may not actually know what the students want to see, and we're able to reverse a lot of that with this particular process and include students from the get-go who are actually empowered to be the leaders. Part of the reason they were really pushing and encouraging this is you can see what our innovation space looked like on the right hand. It was probably the furthest thing from innovative. It was being used only by about 10 students at that time, and for very traditional basic forms of innovation and entrepreneurship, which was really going to limit and stifle our university's potential to become one of the most innovative universities. And as a Jesuit university, we care very deeply about the intersection of social justice and innovation and how those can not only coexist, but better enhance each other. And so we started out on our journey, and one of the things that we are probably most proud of to this day was the broad participation from across campus, but especially from students who were empowered in this process to voice their opinion. We would take coffee out across campus. We took our furniture out across campus. We started doing pop-up workshops to get feedback, not in the space that we had, but we went to go meet students where they were at. We leveraged design thinking methodology to start to better understand and unearth what students actually wanted to see in this space, and they were trained to actually be leaders in this process rather than, again, it being administrators. As part of an effort to really embrace the design thinking process and to continue on with our planning, we did a lot of prototyping. We leveraged our existing space and our existing resources to start trying new programs, to reorganize the space, to bring in different constituents from all across campus to start to engage with us. We knew that we had a process, or a timeline, I guess I should say, of about 2 years before this would be done, and rather than wait and expect immediate change to then take place, we decided to pull people in throughout the process and make them feel as empowered as we were throughout this entire journey. The other thing we did is we made sure that we were constantly communicating. So this was not the only project that our president had spearheaded and kind of given his blessing to. There were a number of different projects across campus. And so collectively, we would all post updates about what we were working on, who the team leads were, so that others across campus that were interested in learning more or getting involved could reach out to those team leads, including myself, my coworker Megan, and our 2 students who were, we made up the core team for this particular project. So people knew across campus what we were working on and how they could get involved within our process. And then I wanted to put up additional pictures of where we ended at the end of the day. In order to maintain a lot of transparency, we have started gathering a number of our stakeholders all across campus. We are very intentional about empowering students in all of the work that we are doing, and we continue to issue regular reports to campus, to both our internal and external stakeholders, so that everyone is constantly feeling engaged. And this process worked well. We've seen the output and the positive outcomes of it for the past 3 years now. And so now we're at a point where we're actually going to go through this again and start to relook at what does the next phase of this look like on our campus and university. And so this was a really timely session for me in particular, because we're in the midst right now of using this same framework as we start to plan out what does this 2.0 version look like for us. We've been very intentional about engaging stakeholders from across campus. We work with all 13 colleges on our campus, and we work with students from every single one of those colleges on campus on a regular basis. But now we know we're at the point where there's definite holes, and we need to start to continue to push ourselves and think bigger picture. And so we're going back to the drawing board using the same framework, and I hope at a future session to be able to share and report out the results of kind of this next phase of our journey. So I wanted to just kind of end quickly before we turn it over to some Q&A, and I bring Elise back with the bullets from that original chart that we showed you. These are kind of our key principles that we hope you guys are able to embrace as well, and look at which things do you already have in place at your organization for the organizational change that you are wanting to embark on, and what things do you need to rethink or enhance or recognize where there may be opportunities or to bring in more people, or to rethink what the alignment looks like in order to have more successful organizational change. We'd both love to open it up for Q&A and see if you guys have any questions, or if anyone wants to pose something that's going on at their university, and as a group we can help kind of think through what may be some creative opportunities, especially right now while we all might be at home, to start to think about how this type of process could be creatively implemented at your university.
Hey, Kelsey, it looks like somebody put a question in the chat. When you were joining forces with other offices, did you ever experience any resistance to change? And if so, how did you suggest navigating those waters if departments feel they need to hold on to their resources, programming, or what have you?
Great question. So a couple of things were going on at the same time. So there was some resistance to change. I also think a lot of people recognize that this was a mandate from our president. This is something he wanted to happen. And so there was this sense of I better get on board or I will be left behind. Interestingly, what we've seen more of, which is part of the reason we're going through this 2.0 version, is we created this hub, and we call it the 707 hub for no other reason than we are in the building on campus called the 707 building. And we wanted, part of our vision was that this would become a hub, kind of a hub and spoke model for across campus, where all type of innovation could operate out of the 707 hub as a starting point, but that we were not the only place where innovation happened. And we were very intentional about communicating that throughout the entire process. What we've noticed more recently is that everyone is recognizing the value of this word innovation, and it's become a little bit buzzy on campus. And so people have started to launch their own programs recently because they recognize that there is a lot of value in doing that, to generate funds from donors, for praise and opportunity across campus. And so we're having to actually go back to the drawing board a little bit and figure out how we re-partner with some groups on campus that have been supportive all along, but they also recognize that there may be some opportunities for them. And we want to be very intentional that we don't duplicate efforts and get back to the point where we were, because we spent so much time doing this. One of the other things that I will say has really helped us is my boss, Jean Hasselhoff, who is our Vice President for Research and Innovation. She was a chemistry professor for many years. She had been interim dean of College of Arts and Sciences, dean of the graduate school, and vice provost of research before being appointed to her current position. She is very well known across campus and well respected by a number of people. And so she's been able to help paint for them this vision and figure out roles for everyone on campus to be involved. And I think it takes people at a university that have been there for a long time that are also flexible and agile. So identifying and finding those partners that have that senior leadership role, they understand the academic orientation of a university, and they have broad-reaching friendships across campus, and they also know how to play the political game. That those types of elements can go really, really far in determining that you continue to have the right relationships and partnerships moving forward. I think it's something that you constantly have to evaluate as well, and you have to be open-minded to the fact that I think innovation is it's sexy. It's a hot topic right now, innovation in whatever form, you are talking about on your campus. And so it's natural for there to be a lot of territory, and figuring out how you are very intentional about saying, we are not the only place where innovation happens. We want to partner, and finding some common ground to work on collaboratively will go a long way. And it ultimately, I think all of our goals is to make the university stronger and the experience for students a lot stronger and more effective. And that's one of the best ways to do it.
I would add a few things. One is that there were definitely pockets around the institution where it typically was that the senior leaders were on board and there was a lot of grassroots work going on, but then there would be sort of the middle management who were uncertain that this is what they were supposed to be doing, and concerned that this really wasn't a priority, like, and that they might get in trouble for, putting their efforts there versus some other higher priority. So it really was imperative for the president to articulate that everybody should be involved. And her quote that I showed you before really got a lot of people feeling empowered, but there were still pockets of resistance. And one thing that we had done for a very long time, a couple years in advance of this, was we would go into our president's office hours and with good news. Or we would send her an email with good news. And believe me, they hear so little good news that if you are the person bringing good news to them on a regular basis, they feel a real gratitude and a need to reciprocate. And so after talking occasionally with the president about the cool things that were happening, we had, we're building up even bigger ideas. And at one point in time, she asked us, after a brief presentation, 15 minutes max, what can I do to help you? This was a magical moment. We had had stuff in our back pocket for a long time in case she asked how she could help. And when she asked how she could help, we said, well, marketing doesn't seem to be on board with this. Is there any, way you could encourage them? And she pulled out her phone and she added it to the agenda for their next meeting, which was the next day. And sure enough, we got a call from marketing very shortly thereafter. She had very gently reminded them that this was in fact an important priority that she wanted them to engage with. So building those relationships over the long haul is really valuable. Another trick we used was to identify champions around campus, especially in the areas that were more recalcitrant. So we would find the one person who was kind of into this and provide resources to them and connect them with people and help them make an impact in their sphere. What we know from psychology is that an outsider coming in is very threatening, but somebody from the inside who wants their group to succeed is considered much more trustworthy and are more likely to be followed.
I want to also add, I think it's really to our benefit to engage students. I have found that that is one way, not only is a great learning opportunity for them, something for them to put on their resume, and our Office of Marketing Communications lives to feature stories when our students are empowered to do something, because that's what's attractive to them and admissions for wanting to bring other students to campus, and why it's a selling point of what our university does that's different. But I've also noticed that that's something that's easy for people to rally around. And so if you do have other departments that are having trouble getting on board, being able to identify students from that college or that program, that helps to kind of take down some of the resistance as well, because again, it's for the betterment of the student as a whole. And that is part of the grounding of why our universities are in place besides the research.
And I'd also like to give a shout out to staff, because sometimes they feel left out of the planning, the decision making, and they get so excited and so engaged to have a voice and to be part of the action. So having groups of planning groups that include staff, faculty, and students, super critical.
I want to quickly bring up another question that was mentioned. It was, you have great involvement of the leadership. How is their involvement in the process, and what tips do you have to engage leadership? And I'm sure Elise and I both have some examples, but I'd love to invite anyone else on the call that does have some other things to share to chime in as well. One of the things I will say, and I will offer this up to anyone, my boss has gotten on the phone with senior leadership from other universities where people who have had trouble engaging their leadership have asked her, like, to give them some coaching about, how this is important, why this is important. And so she's gotten on a lot of calls with universities that are thinking about becoming Ashoka Changemaker campuses, that are thinking about restructuring and realigning their innovation and social innovation programming, just because sometimes it's helpful to hear from one senior leader to another senior leader at a different university, some of their tips and tricks. And so if that's something that's helpful, I say, please reach out to me after this. The other thing is, find another university that that you're close with, and see if one of the senior leaders there, that someone you admire, is willing to talk to a senior leader at your university, because that may be a good way to hear it. We've also done a lot of just calls very similar to this with other universities, my coworker and I, walking them through the process. So don't underestimate the ability to learn from another university. And then the other thing I'll say is, my boss is very, very hands-off, which is probably not traditional and typical, but she really made it very clear that her role in all of this was to engage senior leadership and keep them informed and get their buy-in throughout the entire process, but that the students and my coworker and I were the ones that were empowered to do the work. And we would update her once a week or every other week, just depending on when we had meetings set up. And primarily it was here's what's good that's going on, but then here's the things that we need help with, so that we were really the ones who were empowered to think creatively and to think about who our colleagues were on campus. We also leveraged senior leadership to, similar to Elise, to reach out to others and invite them to be part of the process and feel like it was a special request or ask, and that this was something that they should get involved with. But then we left a lot of the day-to-day work to the doers.
I would add that this is where having a very clear elevator pitch that is mission aligned is super critical, because if the administrators see that it's not in any way controversial, they'll be more apt to jump in. Also, I think data for a lot of leaders is really important, and the Princeton Review and other really well-established sources indicate that this is where our students are coming from. Like, our students really care about being a part of the community and making the community a better place. And so, providing evidence similar to other experts from other schools and whatnot, sending articles. There are always aspirational schools and peer institutions, and if you see an article from, if I see what Marquette's doing, I forward that link to the president or other administrators, because they don't want to be left behind. Yeah, I'd love to hear what other people have done too. Well, while people are thinking, we could actually do a poll. Anybody interested in a poll? I can launch. It's got like 4 or 5 questions. We can just see where everybody is on some of these items. And while people are filling out the poll, feel free to add a question in the chat.
Hi, this is Evelyn from Miami-Dade College. I would say that one of the useful things with our administration, at least at our campus, has been town hall meetings. And so once a year, we have this town hall meeting that we talk about our strategic plan, specifically which ones the campus is in charge of doing and where we're at with the strategic plan. But it also gives us an opportunity to talk about legislative issues. And I am the chair at our campus. It's more of a committee. And so we also get to talk about where we're at with our change-making strategic plan, and what we've been doing, highlight some of the individuals that have been doing different examples. And it's an opportunity to get faculty, staff, administrators all in one room to discuss just specifically change making. And that's been very resourceful in collaborating with the academic area, with student services, as well as our campus president's office, in order to have this 2-hour event once a year.
Great, it's a great example.
I have a quick question. Is that, or should I have typed that? Is it fine if I speak it?
No, you can speak.
Thank you. I have a quick question. So in an organization I'm in right now, we are really trying, in the beginning of the year, we kind of did bare bones, like look at our mission, where we want to be, where we want to go, like what we're missing out on, how we want to get there, like did this whole like planning of how we're going to do that. And we like started up kind of the whole initial plans of what we want to do and like kind of the beginning of how we're going to do that. And then of course, everyone had to go home, and those plans kind of got stopped. So I guess in your guys' experience of kind of going through a whole like culture change and kind of making sustainable change, I'm sure you guys had faced kind of roadblocks, not to like this level, you know what I mean? But like, how did you ever get stopped? Let me rephrase my question. What would be your advice for an organization right now that's kind of right in the middle of change, and now we've had to go virtual? Because my fear is, thank you.
I missed the very last part.
Oh, yeah, just what's your guys' advice for someone who's like right in the middle of change and in this kind of unprecedented time?
That's a really great question, because I think most people in academia are working even harder now under these new conditions with the extra layers that are involved, that asking them to do more is really not an option. And so I think trying to leverage anything that's pre-existing or anything that people have to do anyway could be really your best bet. So for instance, we have a new core curriculum coming online. People have to engage with the core curriculum anyway. So that is a really great opportunity to make sure that there are opportunities for people to integrate sustainability into their courses. Just to provide one example.
I would also say leverage this as an opportunity to be innovative and to challenge yourselves in what you're doing. Everyone is in this similar situation. And so a lot of others on campus, if you guys can be a leader in starting to think about this and continuing to move it forward, people might be more on board because they're looking to others and how they are continuing to keep activities like this going. And you guys could become a really good model And people like things that are winning and where there's action and there's activity. And so if you can start to, rather than say, ooh, like this is a barrier, say, let's use this as an opportunity to be innovative and to get more people involved. You can leverage this as an opportunity to do virtual sessions, virtual calls with stakeholders, gather more information, do benchmarking with other universities. Right now, we're all sitting at home. So if there's people that you want to talk to, you may be able to capture their attention more easily now, even though they're doing a million different things. I think people are craving that ability to interact with others. And so think about how this can be a broad process, and then think about how you can be transparent and share out the results and the work of what you're doing on a regular basis. Because otherwise, you know, people are skeptical in general, but right now you can't have all of the face-to-face meetings or share them out. I think there's going to be it's more important than ever before to keep people updated. So that might be a weekly or monthly newsletter, or creating an online virtual dashboard like the one Elise shared, and allowing others to contribute to it, and use this to build opportunities for virtual connection, which people are craving.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And looking at the poll numbers, I guess I can share those. So looking at the poll numbers, it appears that communication is the weakest link for our group. So I think that emphasizes that it's not something we're necessarily all doing well, that we could certainly improve to our advantage. And then one additional example, we had a student leadership group in the middle of trying to launch some activities on campus right when we shut down, and they've gone to an online eco challenge that they're setting up for Earth Week, and we were pleasantly surprised at the number of people who, when we announced the online eco challenge for people to do at home, hundreds of people engaged immediately to join the eco challenge. So I think there are some electronic tools out there that can really help. And by the way, the tool that we use to collect the information for our strategic plan was from an organization called Social Pinpoint.
We have a few minutes left, and I want to quickly answer one more of the questions that came into the chat from Anne, and it said, did you encounter resistance to centralizing activities? For example, faculty or administrators who had previously oversaw activities locally or had relationships with community partners? And it's a really good question. And it's something that I was very sensitive to and still am very sensitive to this day. And we actually let a lot of people keep a lot of those relationships, but help to figure out what the connecting link was to the work that we were doing. So we tried to create more of a hub and spoke model. We were very intentional not to say, we are the only place, this now comes under us. But we tried to find more opportunities for synergy and collaboration, and for us to be a better partner and help them in what they were already doing. And eventually over time, I mean, this took a couple of years, eventually over time, some of those partnerships transitioned to us, or we solidified and institutionalized why it made sense for things to stay under a certain area. We spent a lot of time creating roles where there were ambassadors and liaisons and partners all across campus. So again, we didn't own it, but we were there to be a support for a lot of the work that they were doing. And they recognized that it was a lot easier to partner with us and create something that was better and more collaborative than the work that they had been previously doing on their own and trying to champion and hit walls or resistance. We also tried to work really intentionally across campus so that community partnerships and innovation was infused all across campus. So resources were centralized, but that didn't necessarily mean that all of the activities happened in a centralized location. And I am more than happy to share more about that if people want to talk more brass tacks about all of that and what we did. But I want to make sure Lisa has a chance to respond, and if anyone else has anything else that they have an opportunity.
Sure, like 100%, I agree in the hub and spoke model, and the idea that instead of being a centralized location where everything was happening, we were merely supporting everybody doing their own work. We were trying to help people make their own work easier and trying and make it the path of least resistance as opposed to adding more for them to do. I had one other thought. Yeah, I guess that's the important thing, is not taking away people's things that they like to do, but trying to collaborate with them, giving them the resources they need. People really enjoy taking on new things when there's, say, financial support behind it.
And I think recognizing the work that people have done and have been doing and celebrating that, and encouraging them to be part of the team and having them see themselves as that and part of this larger effort and organization. And it takes time. It takes time to build the relationships. I actually think it was someone at St. Thomas that told me once that they had a coffee budget. And for like the first year of some of the work that they were doing, they just would meet with people, meet with them where they were at, rather than saying, I'm doing this now, this is my role, but to better understand what the drivers were for people and what they were actually passionate about, and how the work that they had been doing could be part of a larger vision and not someone on an island by themselves.
And I love that you brought up time, Kelsey, because, you know, while we presented this neat series of things that really led to success, it's taken years. It's really important not to get stuck in the temporary setbacks, but to take the long view, to say, well, you know, I'm 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. There are always going to be things that, barriers that are thrown up, or things that come in the way, or unexpected challenges. But it really is about staying the course and, you know, really just persisting in the face of these things.
And I want to be conscientious of time. So I believe we're at time. There's a couple of great comments in the chat section that I encourage you guys to take a look at, some resources that others have shared that will be phenomenal probably for your own journey. And on behalf of Elise and I, we want to thank you for taking time out to listen to us share some of our best practices, and we'd both be more than happy to chat with you further if you have some questions or want us to talk to others at your organization.
Thank you.
Thanks.